If you were to drive past a power plant, would you know what kind of power plant it is? All of the different types of power plants have their own strengths and weaknesses. By the end of this video, you should be able to distinguish between the various types of power plants and identify their strengths and weaknesses. Let's get started. In a previous video, we saw how dense the electricity grid is in the United States. Here we're looking at a map of all of the transmission lines that have voltages over 100 kilovolts. It's a pretty dense network. In order to get some sense of the power plants, we're going to concentrate on a relatively small geographical area. It's called the Midwest. This is an area where the 4 states, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, come together along the Missouri River. I've chosen this region because it has a number of different types of power plants. In terms of the geography, we have the Missouri River passing through the center of the map, and we have 2 major cities. Kansas City has about 2.17 million people living in the region, and then a smaller city called St. Joseph has about 76,000. Everywhere else on the map is pretty much farmland or small towns. Let's now see where the power plants are. The first power plant we're going to look at is a nuclear power plant with a nameplate capacity of 801 megawatts. I want to introduce this word nameplate. What that refers to when you're talking about power plants is the maximum amount of power that you can expect from that plant if it's running at its maximum capacity. That doesn't represent the actual power output of a plant. It's just how much it could theoretically give you if all of the conditions were right. This is called the Cooper Nuclear Station. It's kind of an interesting nuclear power plant because it doesn't look like a traditional nuclear power plant. It doesn't have those cooling towers with their particular shapes. The Cooper Nuclear Station gets its cooling water directly from the Missouri River, so it doesn't need the cooling towers. In fact, a lot of power plants, not only nuclear power plants, need cooling water. That's pretty much related to the fact that a lot of power plants use steam turbines. When you run steam through a turbine to generate power, that steam is then recycled, changing back into water, and then run through the system again. To get the steam to change back into water, that's called condensing. And to get that steam to condense into water, you need to cool it down. That's why we need either cooling towers or a source of cold water. In this case, the Missouri River is providing a convenient source of cold water. Let's now take a look at some of the other large power plants in this region. The 3 here on the map are all coal-fired plants, and we can learn a lot when we compare the powers here. The nameplate capacity of the Cooper Nuclear Station was about 800 megawatts, but you might notice that all 3 coal plants in the region had larger nameplate capacities. One of the advantages of coal-fired power plants is that the electricity tends to be very reliable. Unlike wind or solar, coal plants can pretty much just run all the time. You might also notice that 2 out of the 3 coal-fired plants are built along the same river. Naturally, they're using the Missouri River to provide that condensation that they need for operating their steam turbines. Let's take a look at them. This is the Nebraska City Generating Station with a nameplate capacity of 1,389.6 megawatts. You can usually identify coal-fired power plants because they typically have a very tall chimney stack. This is what the Iatan power plant looks like, also along the Missouri River, with a nameplate capacity of 1,725 megawatts. Let's look at the Thomas Hill Energy Center from the satellite view. As you can see, it's built near a reservoir rather than a river. It nonetheless has a source of water. In the satellite view, we can see large piles of coal and conveyors that carry the coal over to the power plant. The same conveyors are visible in both the Nebraska City Generating Station and the Iatan power plant as well. The petroleum plants in this region tend to be smaller. Let's take a look at one of them. This is what the Gallatin power plant looks like. The first thing you might notice about the Gallatin power plant is that the chimney stacks are a lot shorter, and that's because petroleum tends to burn cleaner than coal does. This is only a 7.2 megawatt facility. Let's now take a look at a natural gas facility. This is a photo of the Auburn power plant. This is a small town in Nebraska. This is an 18.7 megawatt power plant. And what's interesting about this particular power plant is that it's right in the middle of the town. That's an indication of how clean natural gas is. It's carbon emitter for sure, but it doesn't emit dangerous things like sulfur dioxide, for example. It tends not to cause acid rain. That's why they can put such a power plant in the middle of a town without having too many complaints. This is another example of a power plant in Falls City, Nebraska at 31.3 megawatts. Finally, this is what the Carrollton power plant looks like at 20.6 megawatts. There are two things that I'd like to point out about natural gas plants. First of all, natural gas tends to be very easy to transport. You can bury pipes under the ground and gas fills up the available space, so it's very easy to transport gas. Secondly, these natural gas plants, in addition to burning the fuel relatively cleanly, they can make up for local demands that change over time. For example, there's an area that has a lot of wind turbines or a lot of solar farms. We know that the wind's not always going to be blowing. We know that the sun is not always going to be shining. We don't really have very good batteries to store that energy when we're not using it. In electrical grids of today, pretty much the power is produced the moment it's consumed. So natural gas facilities serve a purpose, and that is for load balancing. When the sun's not shining, it's easy to just turn on the natural gas facility and get that power on demand relatively easily and quickly. It takes a lot more effort to fire up a nuclear facility, for example. In this map, I could find only one biomass facility, and that's the St. Joseph landfill generating station. I would assume that they burn wood chips, trees, and things like that people have brought in. It's relatively low power plant, only 1.6 megawatts. Finally, there are two solar facilities here on the map. Let's take a look at the Trenton Solar Farm from space. It's a 2.8 megawatt facility. Of course, that's only when the sun is shining. It's about 340 meters long and 180 meters wide. That corresponds to about 15 acres. At about $8,000 per acre, this land might be worth about $120,000. Now the question is this: how long will it take them to earn back their land investment when they sell the power? Well, with an average of 4.5 hours of full sun every day in this region, then the facility would generate about 12.6 megawatt hours of electricity per day. If we assume 5 cents per kilowatt hour, then the daily revenue would be about $630. It would take 192 days to recoup the land investment. I think that's pretty good, but you have to keep in mind that's only the land. That doesn't include the cost of the solar cells. Presumably, it would take a number of years in order to recover the investment when you include the solar cells and the inverters as well. The last thing that I'd like to point out on the map is that we have a large number of wind facilities. It's presumably a rather windy area. Each one of these little dots on the map in gray represents a wind turbine. These things are massive. Look at how high it is, and especially how high it is in comparison to the trees that are growing right next to it. When we get up close to this wind turbine, we see that it's about as wide as a car. And inside it has a little staircase that goes all the way to the top so that the engineers can service the turbines. In the United States, the mean wind turbine capacity is about 1.67 megawatts. The typical capacity factor of a wind turbine in the US is about 33%. That means that the turbine's not on all the time, so you're not always going to get the maximum power available from your turbine. Average output is about a half a megawatt, and the typical cost of one of these wind turbines is about $2 million. In any geographical area, there always tends to be a mix of different types of power plants, a number of distribution lines, and then of course they all have to be connected together in a grid. So the last thing I'm showing here on the map is the location of the substations. Each of these little purple circles here on the map represents the location of a substation. A substation is a place where transmission lines of different voltages meet and come together. Substations typically contain transformers and switchgear that protects the transmission system or the electricity grid. It has things like circuit breakers, cutout switches, in addition to the transformers. We'll look at substations in more detail in a future video, but before we wrap up this video, I'd just like you to notice that substations and power plants tend to be more concentrated in regions where there's a large population density. I mentioned before that we have Kansas City down in this area of the map, and you can see that we do indeed have more substations and more power plants in this particular region. We have a whole series of professionally filmed and edited videos in order to help students learn the fundamentals of electricity. If you like watching this particular video, then you might like to check out some of our others too.